Good morning, friends. And I'll say good morning to everybody else, since when I said friends, only some of you quieted down. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome you to the convocation, which is a part of our annual celebration, Preaching with Power. We are indeed blessed this morning to have as our guest one of the from my perspective, most brilliant people you will ever have the opportunity to meet in your life. I've warned some of you that you needed to bring your football helmets because she will entirely explode your mind, which is what she does every time I'm with her. I've known the Reverend Dr. Barbara Holmes for about 7 years now, and she is a tremendous scholar and a tremendous force in theological education. The Reverend Dr. Holmes is the Vice President of Academic Affairs and the Dean of Memphis Theological Seminary in Memphis, Tennessee. She holds a PhD from Vanderbilt University, an MDiv from Columbia Theological Seminary, and a JD from the Walter F. George School of Law. She is a scholar, author, teacher, and community leader. Among her publications are Joy Unspeakable, Contemplative Practices of the Black Church, Race and Cosmos, An Invitation to View the World Differently. And that's, let me just pause there and say what that book is about is the application of string theory in quantum physics to the issues of race within our society. So this gives you an idea of who we'll be hearing from, as well as a private woman in public places, Barbara Jordan's speeches on ethics, public religion, and law. Now, in addition to these books, Dr. Holmes has published numerous articles, is nationally sought after speaker, so we were very fortunate to get her. I leaned on her heavily and our friendship very heavily to get her, so we are indeed blessed to have her. Among the awards she's received is the John Templeton Science and Religion Syllabus Award in the year 2001. And once again, thank you all for being with us, and I now give you Dr. Holmes.
Good morning. Thank you for that introduction, Dr. Ray. I promise you we will not be going on any space journeys today. We're going to stay grounded. I am speaking today on the power of contemplative practices as a resource from the Black church to the Church Universal. And I'm going to do this in 3 movements. First, I want to talk about the state of the Black Union, some questions for the Black church. Second, I want to talk about reclaiming African diasporan historical connections through the legacy of contemplative practices. And then finally, I'm going to do a very brief homily because I want to mine the resources of contemplative practices in the Black church and see if it'll preach. Now, a colleague of mine was preaching a few weeks ago at a Baptist church, and she was trying to keep the people with her, doing call and response, and still trying to stay true to her theological analysis when one of the old deacons got bored. And he started saying, "Take us back to the cross, daughter. Take us back to the cross." And so I'm going to take you by the cross before we end, because I want to know that if what we're doing is good for the academy, it also has to be good for the church. So first, questions for the Black church. Preaching with power is more than a hoop. It's more than ending up at the foot of the cross. We are finding it harder to preach during good times than we did during times of deep oppression. Historically, preaching with power in the Black church emanated from suffering, named and unnamed, from triumphs whispered and shouted, and from just the everyday keeping on, keeping on. Preaching in the Black church is a translation of human experience and spiritual intention into pragmatic theologies of communal and personal empowerment. Preaching in the Black church is powerful because we preach our lives. We preach what we understand. We also preach what we do not understand. We preach in the voice of the long-gone aunties and the big mamas. We preach out of silence, and we preach out of the shout. We preach through prayers that were once embodied in bent backs, and through the songs that everybody knows. If you go to the right church and you raise a song, everybody knows that song. That's better than the sermon. It often is the sermon. Preaching with power in the Black church has a rhythm to it. It begins with the mysticism of the talking drum, picks up the rhythm of the ring shout, and is passed on through the songs. Most songs today are living sermons. The words are spare, the melodies are simple, leaving room for the people to inhabit the spaces, to travel to inner sanctums. I'm thinking of songs like Never Could Have Made It. Now, you know, you go into a church and you hear, never could have made it, and everybody loses their mind. What is it about those few words except for the fact that suddenly something changes, the air changes, and people begin to ride toward the inner sanctum? Power comes from what people inject into the verses. So in effect, the people are preaching back. From the outside, it looks like, oh, isn't that cute? Whenever the preacher talks, they say amen. No, they are preaching from the pews. They are not sitting waiting for the word to come from there, because if the word isn't here as well as there, I can't use it, because I can't take the preacher home with me. In times of trouble, when the praying and the singing would stop after a lynching or a very bad whipping, I can hear an old grandmother rallying the community with words and song. I don't hear you people. I don't hear you praying. Times may be hard, but prayer changes things. And then she would raise a song, couldn't hear nobody pray. Couldn't hear nobody pray. Anybody know it? Couldn't hear nobody pray. Way down yonder by myself. Couldn't hear nobody pray. Ruby Sales says she remembers that song the way her grandmama sang it. And she never again sang it in her own voice because there was a rattle in her grandmama's throat that was a sermon. And it would connect her to the history and to prayers uttered a long time ago. This song is a good example of an expression of human experience that becomes a statement about spiritual intention and theological purpose. My work with contemplative practices began when I was trying to name something I didn't understand. I saw it happening all the time. I saw it in the songs. I felt it in the sermons, but I couldn't name it. And that was odd for me, because I was a child of the church. When you spend as much time on a pew as you do in school, you love the Black church in ways that don't even make any sense. Now, as an adult, I expect politicians to lie to me. I expect wars and rumors of war. But I expect when I walk through the doors of any Black church, something will be said that will make sense. Some song will be sung, and it will be well with my soul. I'm going to switch over to the slides now so I can show you what I mean about these contemplative practices. These are the questions that I had for the church that made me want to turn more inwardly. How do you preach so that the internal, the external are also covered? Are we honoring the particularity of call in all persons, regardless of race, gender, sexuality? Is our preaching relevant to younger generations? Is our preaching responsive to issues of alienation and nihilism? Are we oriented toward a theology of relationality in a global community? Or, as my colleague, Dr. Valerie Bridgman Davis says, you worship in village gods. This is a broader God that we serve. And are we connecting to other marginalized communities? The question is, have we bothered in our striving to begin to think about who we are now? Who are we? What are the values that we have? This is Howard Thurman. These are the questions he put to us many years ago that are still viable. What are our values? Are we willing to sacrifice anything? And if so, what? What do I love most in my life? And what will I do to sustain it? There is an identity crisis for the church as a whole. There is this strange nexus between church and commerce. It came to my view when I was writing the book and turned on the television and saw the Sears Gospel Choir. I just don't understand the incongruity of that idea. In a culture that is entertaining itself to death, what does the church bring that will last? The songs that you're singing now will be quaint in a few years. The choir robes will be ancient and rotted. What will you leave for other generations that they can grasp and hold on to? I believe the journey is contemplative. The journey is inward. I still, as I was writing the book, could not get my hands around what it was because people kept saying to me, African Americans don't have any contemplative practices. They love a good shout. They like to dance and say amen, but they don't understand the inner workings of contemplative practices. And then I heard this. Bring it up like it would be in the black church. Bring it up. Bring it up. Let's hear it. You can't hear it, don't play it. Jesus. That's the only words to the whole song. The whole church stopped. The church pulled itself together and turned. It went somewhere. Thank you. You can take the music down now. Did you feel it? That's when I knew what it was. The black church did have contemplative practices, but they were different than Eurocentric practices. They were communal. They were evocative. There was a group sense of heightened spiritual awareness, mystical encounter. How would you describe practices that are contemplative? Do you think of them as monastic, or quiet, or austere? In these instances, the entire church went together. They didn't go to the same place, but they entered the same inner sanctum together. It wasn't silent. Oh, mother screamed. People passed out. Other people ran the aisles. Others just fell to the knees. I was looking in the Bible because, I grew up UCC, but I had to get a tambourine in there. And I became Apostolic Holiness Pentecostal. My UCC preacher said, but you came from such a good family. And I looked in the Bible to be sure I wasn't completely off base, and I saw that in the upper room, the Spirit descended on the group. And they entered the inner sanctum together. And silence was not the response to the falling of the Spirit. They acted like they were drunk. The second movement, reconnecting the church to the history. The legacy of Christianity for Black Americans does not begin with slavery. It begins with the connections to the continent of Africa, West Africa, particularly that section of the continent. If we are preaching, but we are not connected to Tertullian, Augustine, Mary of Egypt, then we are like cut flowers that will bloom for a little while, but without deep roots. Amen. This is a quote from one of my favorite people. Africana Christianity has been treated as an interloping reality in the stream of religious history. This racial bifurcation of perceived Christian origins creates reluctance on the part of African Americans to claim John Calvin, Luther, and John Wesley as mentors in the faith, while members of the dominant culture are unwilling to acknowledge their connection to African church fathers and mothers like Augustine and Tertullian. The legacy of monasticism is rooted deeply in Africa, but many of the saints of Africa have been portrayed and depicted as Anglo. The contemplative aspects of Africa go out of a deep sense of interconnection between things that are gone and things that are here. There's not a radical bifurcation between good and evil. The living and the dead communicate with one another. And Olu Taiwo says, you can feel it in the space between your breasts. That's a contemplative moment. In the return beat, and they call the return beat the beat between the beat when they're beating the talking drum. That's the contemplative space that we have to inhabit. The talking drum is the originator out of Africa of our contemplative resources. Keeper of cultural history, it receives the messages from the living and the dead and transmits it. Do we teach sermons historically rooted so our children will have something to take with them? The other place I found contemplative practices was in the slave ship, where Africans of different nations are thrown into the hold of a ship without the same gods to pray to, without the same languages, without the same understandings, and the only thing that knits them together is the moan. And the moan becomes that contemplative sound that creates a community out of people who had never been a people. It carries over to the hush arbor, where people are under the wash pedal, praying in the kettles in the forest, hushing, hush, somebody call. And in the ring shouts. David Daniels says the ring shout, it was the same, the drum was taken from them. The ring shout was the same rhythms as the African drums and talking drums that had been taken. And in the ring shout, my people from the Gullah Islands, we call ourselves Geechee. You never cross your legs. When you do the ring shout, your legs must not cross, because if they cross, you dancing. If your legs do not cross, you are shouting to the glory of God. So you will see in these pictures that they do not cross their legs. See any legs crossed? No, sir. No, ma'am. Dancing to the glory of God. Then we move to the civil rights movement. We have to do this in 45 minutes, so stay with me. These decades are flying by. And you see in the marches either silent or with singing, this sense of unity. They were saying to us as we were in cell, lock your arms, stay together. It was during that period where my dad, in terms of crisis contemplation, was with me in Selma. They were urinating on our shoes, and he was an old World War II veteran. And he said, Barbara, don't give me any lip. You know how you like to run your mouth. When I tell you drop and cover, drop and cover. And he was watching the rooftops for snipers. And I wondered about this incongruous connection of fear and hatred and holy moment that we experienced when we were in Selma. The night before, with the guards all around this small black church, they put us, the children, in the basement of the church. And then the men sat outside in their undershirts and folding chairs to protect us with nothing. And behind them stood the church mamas with big potato salad spoons in their hands. We weren't so sure about those men in the folding chairs, but we knew those mamas. Nothing was getting through. Contemplative moments in the midst of crisis. And then, of course, Rosa Parks, who is an anchorite of sorts, who sits in a bus and it becomes a monastic cell, and she refuses to move, and she's steady because she said, I knew they could have lynched me, but I had the strength of the ancestors with me. The marches, the rhythms, and at the end of the book, I talk about the rhythms of this generation and the tapping, the insubordinate tapping of Savion Glover, whose shoes work out the rhythms. It's a sermon. Have you heard it? Yes. It's a sermon. He's tapping out angst and anger and defiance. Tap dancing used to be something some folk were ashamed of because it came during a period where folk were in blackface or whiteface and tapping and telling jokes. And when I was growing up, people say, you don't want to learn how to tap dance. Savion Glover took that, turned it on its head, and defiantly tapped out the legacy of his people. This is what I want to do to reclaim the legacy. I want us to preach so that we stand on the shoulders of the ancestors. I want us to honor the past and move toward the future. I want us to absolutely affirm the new generation and what we say over our pulpits. I want us to stop pretending we're not wounded by what has gone on. We are wounded, psychically wounded, all of us are. But those of us who have cultural wounds need to accept it, admit it, and get healed. And then we need to stop pretending that we've made it. And we need to embrace outsiders while the insiders are looking. I want to turn to the homily, a brief homily. The story that I tell in the book is of my great-grandparents in a field in South Carolina. They were Holmeses and Thurmans. Yes, Strom, from those plantations. And one of the brothers insulted an Anglo woman in town. And the clan said, we're coming to get him. So this is a big family. If you want to live, give him up. And my great-grandfather said, we ain't giving up nothing. And they locked and they loaded and they laid in the fields for weeks. Every night they'd go out and wait. And one night the clan rode in. They shot everything that came in on a horse. They'd already sent the women to the next town to wait by the train station. They joined them and got on the train. But they were Geechees and they couldn't speak good English. Well, what's good English? They spoke Geechee with the dialect. That's my indoctrination. And so they said, we want to go to Newark, Michigan, because they knew that there were car factories there. But the train station person thought they said Newark. So they got tickets to Newark, New Jersey. And there wasn't anywhere else for them to go. I move in this homily toward two Marys. The first Mary in Memphis, Tennessee, at a church I was in 1 week ago. Her first son died of gun violence in Memphis. Her second son was just killed. She was inconsolable. She sat in that church, and I watched the pastor confused as to what to preach, what to say, what to do, and he knew he couldn't just start preaching. She wasn't speaking, she was just rocking and moaning, just rocking, having just buried her last and second son. And so he called one of the old deacons to come up and say a prayer. And the deacon did, and it missed the mark. It missed the mark because he relied on words. When the preacher realized that this had not done the trick, he walked up to the microphone and he started lining a hymn. Now, I grew up in the UCC, so I'm gonna start this, but somebody better help me. And the pastor said, The women got up. They started surrounding Mary. Mary fell back into our arms, and we rocked her while she moaned. And he kept lining And the church kept singing, and we held her. There's another Mary at the foot of the cross. Her son, her only son, about to be gone. She's not saying anything, she's just moaning. The men have left, the women are standing. Jesus looks down, and as the oldest son knows what he has to do, he has to say, Mommy, look at here. This is John. That's your new son. John, that's Mama. Get out of here. Move her. And I imagine that John wanted to show Jesus right then and there that he could get this done. So he probably said to Mary, look, Mama, come on. Let's get out of here. There's nothing more you can do here. And I believe that Mary pulled a Jennifer Hudson on him. And she said, I can tell you I ain't going. This is the best son I ever had. I'm not moving. Leave me alone. Get off of me. What if he says something else? What if he says, I love you, Mommy, and I'm not here to hear it? I don't think so. I'm standing here. And the moan picks up again. And then she hears it. She hears the prayer that she taught him, and she cannot believe her ears. Jesus says, into your hands I commit my spirit. The phrase comes from Psalm 31. Tradition says that the psalm was taught to Hebrew children as a bedtime prayer. Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to take. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. The psalm says, for your name's sake, lead me and guide me, for you are my refuge. Into your hands I commit my spirit, for you have redeemed me. Oh, Lord, faithful God. Mary can't believe it. She's inches from his nailed feet, and she hears the bedtime prayer that she taught him. She's beginning to understand. The prayer was for protection during sleep, not death. He said it every night. He woke up every morning. Jesus is saying, go with John, Mommy. I love you. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy will come on resurrection morning. I'm going to get up just like I did every morning after a good night's sleep. Now she can go. But Jesus is in God's care. She feels like shouting, but instead she murmurs the prayer, leans on John, letting the comfort of her new son embrace her, letting the prayer of her son's Savior bless her. We are also at the foot of the cross today. The children assigned to us by Christ are in need of our help. They are dying too young. They are killing too often. The prayers are needed. It may take a moan, a dance, a hand clap, a toe tap. It may take prayer first or sermons that reach the heart of the matter. But I believe that God will be with us as we incline our hearts toward the throne of grace. Amen.